curious here. I was thinking it would be very easy to have a utopian society. But the fact is, humanity doesn't trust itself. You see, if we could actually have a few simple things that are not politically viable now, it would be very easy to create a very cost-effective infrastructure that would utilize space to make cheap, almost limitless clean energy available. With current technology, it would really be very simple. If you want to get mass materials into space for building, you simply take just a non-located area, barren, way out of the way, like the middle of the Mojave Desert or something like that, somewhere real desolate and remote, with no ties to oceans or rivers and underground water, somewhere that's basically a sand pit or a rock. And you take a high conventional explosive, very well packed, like one of these aerosol bombs, or no, because I think those have to spread out. But anyway, there's really mass high explosives now, high yield chemical explosives. Over that, you cap a very minimal fission atomic bomb shell, so you will get very little radiation, just enough to induce a fusion reaction. And then from there, you could add on tons of friggin' hydrogen. That's what a hydrogen bomb is, basically. Fusion. And it's the cleanest burning thing in the world. Now see, why you have that little fission cap is because it's the fission that's dirty. The splitting apart of atoms is what causes all the radiation. Except for the long-term radiation. Except for the gamma burst that causes short-term radiation, but will still accumulate. You see, it's all about decay rates. Fission things decay, centuries. Gamma bursts decay in decades. And if you add more and more and more, if you keep blowing up something in a hole, even if it's relatively clean, like what I described, this 3-tier bomb, that is actually possible. They're huge. So they're not useful for conventional deterrence. And no one wants to make, and in the policy of MAD, no one wanted to make nuclear weapons more tempting to use as a tactical weapon. They were a political deterrent, a strategic defense. Back when it was considered that people actually cared about not dying themselves. Thank you, terrorists. No, but this is part of the problem with things in space. And how we, as human beings, live in our own problems. We are limited by our own nature. Because you could take one of those and you could put them in a really big hole, really deep hole, and you could put material in there, and you could actually blow things out in space that would stay together. Heavy materials. I don't mean like depleted uranium or anything, but see, there's the catch. You could put something like that and just lob a big gob of junk over to someone else's friggin' country. Or if friggin' you're trying to shoot materials into space, to have people movers go up there and, shuttle equipment and stuff to make something out in space, and it lands in someone else's country, well, boo-hoo, you accidentally made World War III. And that's the problem, see? And then there's the whole nuclear thing and issue and yada, yada, yada. But why would you want to do that? Well, because it's one way to cheaply put materials into orbit. And the reason you want to do that is because that way it creates a viability for an infrastructure that for a little bit more cost you can find schemes to make people movers. In other words, things that get people into space safely, into space, and then you can work from there to create whatever you need, like solar satellites. If you had solar satellite, and why you don't put it on the moon is because the moon has a gravity well, and even though it's tidally locked on the Earth, in other words, it's always sunny on the moon, it's a long distance. It's easier just to keep it in orbit. It's a lot closer. Or at the Lagrange point, I think it's called Lagrange, there's a gravity point between the Earth and the moon where things just sit. But it's a lot safer to keep it in orbit because the Earth's magnetic field covers things in low and middle Earth orbits. I think even somewhat in high Earth orbit because of solar storms. And an interesting fact I found out that the high solar flares, that when the sun's on the high side, because it dips and goes up and down every 11 years, that's when solar radiation is actually safer, because the sun's also blowing out a bunch of magnetic bands of magnetism with those solar particles, and that actually defends from the solar radiation coming in from outside the solar system, which is much more deadly. Yeah, I mean, the people sitting up in the International Space Station are getting irradiated, and they get irradiated less when there's a solar storm, and it's a lot safer by the planet. It's true. So, basically, if you had solar satellites, which are basically solar cells or a floating solar solar array, which is like a solar station, but with perfect utilization, that shoots a high microwave beam down to a collector. But then there again you go, you have friggin' a high microwave beam, nothing like a friggin' 100 terawatt friggin' focused friggin' maser, to hit the wrong place. Frickin' Z you pretty quick. So you got things shooting up. Or you can also do this with a Babylon gun, which is a big friggin' cannon that uses gases. Well, it's also called the Saddam gun, but it was originally conceived by Jules Verne on his 1903 book, or 1893 maybe. I'm not sure the exact date. Around there times. It was a French title, but From Here to the Moon, or something like that. I'm sure you can wiki it real quick. Anyway, but yeah, you ever seen that picture of the moon with the bullet stuck in the eye? That was from that idea. That's from that movie. Except the gun is a lot longer, and per pound, it puts things into orbit for like 90 cents or $1 instead of $1,000. So you see, if you could put cheap materials up there and have something, I don't know, like a space plane or something to move a lot of people that could be reusable, then what you have is a way to connect labor to materials to energy. And that's all it really takes to make a resource abundant society. You see? Well, that and space, or land, or area, if you don't have land. That's why people are always talking about building stuff at sea and other things, because a resource, the resources are, well, is information, energy, area, labor, and what was that last one? Did I say materials? I don't know. Maybe materials. Anyway, if I screwed that up, you get it. Just look at post-scarcity. You'll find out real quick. Anyway. But see, if we could do that right now, if we could trust ourselves. If you're okay with things, nuclear power being used like that, and people having the high ground above you with vast amounts of freaking materials and resources and infrastructure, and if you're willing to go out and work in space, then sure, the whole universe opens up. Or most importantly, the whole solar system. It's one thing we don't see in science fiction nowadays, is they always avoid, as much as they can, that little problem of freaking that jump step to our own backyard, our own frontier, which is not the furthest star, but is just the very boring work of solar naturalism. You know, if we had a basic energy infrastructure around our planet to have a foothold into space, then the moon, other places around, would start having connections, and you would build like a railroad to the stars, or an airport, spaceport. You know, it would be like that. There would be little frontier places, little places that relied on infrastructure, or actually could connect without having to use Earth resources anymore. See, because once you can connect labor to materials to area, you can create about anything. Now you might ask yourself, well, how are you going to create food? How are you going to create air? How are you going to create water? Well, actually, that can actually be done in space. Believe it or not, it's very energy expensive, but you get the right materials and you can synthesize artificial environments. Sort of like that old 70s science fiction thing. It was real eco, and it was so silly now, but it was kind of funny. I forgot what it was, but he eventually he was manning these eco pods in space, and he had these little robots helping him. And finally, he got tired of humanity because they had burned out the planet or something. And all the people on the friggin' space thing with him were jackasses. So he friggin', I don't know if he killed them off or they died off or something. But he friggin' set the thing adrift and friggin' floated out to space with his little robot buddies and his little Eden forever. You know, where were... And this thing was like a glass dome, right? Where was he getting the friggin' sunlight from? I mean, he was drifting away from the sun. I don't know. It's just, you know, trust me, you don't want to live in a solar greenhouse without friggin' off the supply lines. It won't work. There'll be a leak. You know, you'll be too old. You'll do something wrong. The robots will malfunction. You know what I mean? Get the hair cutting friggin' program mixed up with the hedge cutting trimmers or something. You know, I forgot what Silent Running. That was the name of it. I think it was Silent Running. I think. God, I should have looked that up. See, I never look up my videos because I never know where I'm going to go with them. So I'm always like freaking going, oh yeah, that thing, because that's where I freaking go. But once I freaking go and set out a freaking course for my video, then it's like, you know, flubbing all over it. So that's why. But see, that's where we can be right now. If you had cheap energy, you would have, you know, you could friggin' recycle all the materials we need. All the shit floating out in the ocean, all the oil that wouldn't have to be used for fuel, that could just be made into plastics. And it could be, and when it broke and recycled, wore down, could just be friggin' safely recycled and recycled and recycled again. It would deplenish, but you could grow friggin' crops and friggin' turn that into friggin' oil or materials or some type of fibrous material. You know, you could go all natural as far as that goes with cheap energy. You know? Basically. You can just keep recycling the friggin' metals and everything else too for your technology. Yeah, basically. And that's why we're not there and why we're not going there. At least not for a long, long time, if ever make it. This is some of the things I think about because I wanted to write this series. I have these little fancy things where I'm a TV producer or a TV show developer or whatever it is that friggin' the person that makes up the friggin' TV shows and friggin' puts them on the air. You know, I think it's producer or conceived by, you know, Blue Skies, conceived by Timothy Knight, you know. Ha ha ha, you know, every week they friggin' play some friggin' 60s song and friggin' have this little, like, friggin' ABC's Pan Am, except it's in space, and friggin' it's like friggin' the things like friggin' Hotel, and then there's all this political drama and all this future shit I like to think about, you know, like space guns and friggin', you know, and friggin' aerospace planes and friggin', you know, all this other over the edge of horizon things that never friggin' come friggin' ever, you know. You know what I mean? Anyway. That's just the problem with science fiction. You can't friggin' get a good story out of friggin' solar expedition. So they skip over it really quick. Because it's kind of boring. There's always some alien, or there's always a real fast transition to freaking faster than light, and artificial gravity. You know, I got news for you. If you freaking got artificial gravity, if you got grav plates, you don't need any other kind of freaking drive. You can just put the ship into fall that way. Because you could stick 10 times as many grab plates on the back of it and make it go. Or on the front of it. I don't know which. You know what I mean? And then you just stand on the other end and friggin' you'll go off at 1G and it'll just keep picking up and falling while you're just standing there, you know, walking around the friggin' deck. Matter of fact, it'd be kind of like Star Trek, but it would be like a big friggin' saucer or a square or something, and you would just be falling friggin' face forward towards whatever you were friggin' aiming at. You wouldn't be going sideways. You'd be going flatways. You'd be like a flying pie, you know, and friggin' without the right sensors or something. Well, if you got gravity, I imagine you can make gravity waves to shift things off, but actually you'd be pulling things towards you as you're frigging pushing towards something. You know, micrometers, small little frigging shit like that, you know. You know, shit. Near relativistic speeds. I mean, shit, you know. Oh, look! The aft section has a friggin' 5-inch hole in it. What does that mean? Oh, it means atmospheric pressure is sucking me through a friggin' thing the size of a friggin' Coke bottle. This isn't fun. Whee! My space adventure didn't go so good.